to the cloud. Okay, and let me share the window.
It's the wrong date, right, in the minutes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It says the 17th.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's a bug. Chrome, this should be it. Okay, hopefully that is the right screen. And sorry, let me also make it bigger. All right, everyone, thanks for joining the call. This is basically a continuation of the technical alignment discussion. What we had talked about last week was continuing. Well, what we talked about mostly was kind of the principles, right? What are the principles that we want to kind of have as we talk about alignment between the two projects? So we came out with basically this top level principle: must be possible to implement both Jakarta and microprofile in the same product. This was not agreed to. This was kind of in discussion, I think, when the call was nearing completion. And then we also had a discussion in email as well, right? So I guess going on from here, sorry, I see a chat here, make sure I have it all. All right, okay, David also pasted the minutes. Maybe continue along with the principles, and if there's any principles that you think should be added based on the discussion since the last meeting, we could also add those in here. So I guess this next one is, do we want to provide guidance on when a project should start in microprofile or in Jakarta?
No.
Any comments?
I will go back to the first two calls that we had privately, in which we said that this group, these calls, shouldn't govern. We can steward the direction technically speaking, but we shouldn't dictate, or we should be very careful. It is up to the developers and the committee, the ecosystems, to decide which working group aligns with their goals, either the Jakarta or the microprofile projects. We are to answer the questions and ask questions. Should we invited for that kind of conversation? Well, we must not be seen as a government body, because otherwise that will be CN4J will become a working group above both projects, and it will change entirely the dynamics. So to that, there is a danger, and we shouldn't even consider it.
I would, yeah. Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's that's from day one. I think the message was clear. CN4J is kind of basically the platform for two working groups come together to discuss. And I don't think it's a kind of anybody suggests this one is make a decision, etc. The people like in the different working group also on this call, and that's kind of personal making decisions and etc. However, we just use this platform to discuss the alignment. I think this is a very important platform. So it's kind of sometimes we have to discuss, I mean, over the fence. It's not like we discuss in one and we all in a closed door. Here it's basically a good platform.
Besides the what Amelia said on the organizational side, there could be good technical reasons to establish a new specification on one of the working groups. So I think we don't need or should not make a statement there. But I would have an addition to the first point. from my perspective, it's not only in the same product. There should be, or it should be possible to use both technologies in one application, one user application running in one of or both of the platforms. So maybe we should omit the in the same product or add or software at the end to make that precise. So there is no switch in the product or in the platform that you can use Jakarta or microprofile. You can use them at with the same product and in the application in the same application and software component you wrote for that platform.
I would agree with that.
How do we write it? Something like that.
Like this, yeah.
Yeah, you could say same product and application. You can keep simultaneously, but add also application in there.
Since I said
Good
what's
call out, Jan.
yeah, so with guidance on when a project should start in microprofile, what are others in this call think about this? Because Emily and I disagree. What are other, and John agrees with me, others points of view
Yes.
on?
Okay, let me say then. I think it's up to the spec. It's up to the people who creates the spec to choose what kind of standards they want to use for the spec. We may explain that microprofile is good for that, but in this case, Jakarta will have disadvantages, or we can explain that Jakarta is good for that, or this and that, and in this case, microprofile will have some disadvantages, right? So what I would say here, it's completely up to the people who wants to create the spec to choose basically the platform. Providing guidance in this case, I'm afraid that we'll come back to discussing differences between Jakarta and microprofile again, which possibly we don't want.
Correct. We need to delete that. Any other points? We have 3 different opinions. Oh, well, Dimitri agrees also. We have 4 opinions here.
Yeah, I can also agree that it should be the creator that decides where he finds the best place to put his work. And that can be either groups or they can be undecisive, and then they can ask questions. But then again, we come up with a discussion about the differences, which we want to avoid. But yeah, I think based on what the positioning and messaging about each group is, I think is clear enough so that they are able to choose where they want to start.
I agree. Freedom of choice is important.
Okay, so do we delete number 2, please?
Well, maybe there are other people who haven't spoken yet that.
Yes. Does anyone disagrees to delete this or provide?
Or are there just more thoughts in general?
I think there still needs to be a cross working group message that is providing some guidance. I mean, here we're saying guidance, we're not setting requirements. I mean, when I brought this up, the point was that I felt there were 2 specifications that were started in Jakarta that were inappropriate because they didn't have sufficient enterprise exposure and implementations. And yet there was an expectation that they were going to be showing up in the profile. So my attempt at providing some kind of guidance was, if there continues to be an expectation that an individual specification is going to show up in a platform, there's got to be some meat behind it. There's got to be some demand from enterprise customers. That was what I was trying to get at, but could never articulate it adequately. So I mean, if it can just be done in terms of some form of guidance along the lines that we've talked about, there are different expectations in these working groups. There's different histories, etc. That I think that is a good starting point that people should have exposure to when they're deciding where they're going to start.
But I think some of it goes down to what are the philosophical differences between these two working groups to aid a potential spec proposer to choose one or the other, right? So I don't think it's necessarily very clear that there are slightly different philosophies about how the different working groups will work on specifications. So to the extent that we could actually sort of capture those and compare and contrast them, that may aid people that want to propose a specification to guide them to the appropriate working group.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just add a little bit to what Scott said. So it's for the guidance. For example, somebody is already very keen to submit a proposal. And if that person is very determined, like has made a decision, yeah, I want to go with Jakarta, yeah, that's fine. So for others, maybe they are deciding between Jakarta and microprofile with some guidance, I think it does help. One particular situation is sure, if you want to create a spec, pull in some CNCF libraries such as OpenTelemetry, or some other things might change over the time. Probably is not a good thing to introduce into Jakarta if you have some other dependencies. In this kind of thing, spec, maybe you better end up in the microprofile. So basically, it's a basic guideline. It's just guide you through. You don't have to listen to it. Or if you are saying, okay, yeah, that's guidance. Is guidance. I very much want to create a Jakarta spec. Go with it. If it's a working group voted across the past, that's fine as well. But I think with some advice, it does help.
And what is stopping that contributor from reaching out to the CN4J forum and asking questions that we can answer via that medium? The problem is that if a body decides that it's going to be guiding someone else, informally doing so, then the two projects committees will have to vote to have a united voice. For example, one committee and microprofile will have a different opinion on the same topic about a new project. How do we, as a unit, decide what is best for a project? That creates a mandate in a body that is responsible for the future of the project. And I am saying, when we spoke months ago, when we created in October or November, I can't remember, we said that we need to be very careful on how we're perceived. We can answer any questions, but we need to be very careful to take the responsibility and own it. That is up to that ecosystem to choose. It's like buyer beware. Where do you want to go?
I was waiting to talk. That's really long.
Sorry, but yeah.
So I don't have a problem. So the guidance thing is tricky because, as Dimitri points out, it gets back to the differences, and I just don't see us coming to agreement on it. So I've expressed multiple times that I do see, microprofile as the place to try out ideas which are perhaps on technology that's, changing itself so quickly. And itself, I use the word volatile. Mark didn't like the word volatile, but that is the situation in a lot of these cloud technologies. A spec might live for 2 years and then it gets completely trashed and a new one comes around to replace that and one other spec, which is like the case of, metrics and open telemetry. So it's like we have like 2 potential microprofile specifications that might get killed by open telemetry. And so I think that you know, we want a place where we can communicate to the industry, hey, things over here are attacking the latest cutting edge. They may not be stable for you because that cutting edge itself is not stable. And if you have an idea that you want to attack something in that space, let's do it over here on microprofile, you know. You know, that I've definitely had that perspective for the longest time. I still have that perspective. I just don't know that coming up with any kind of guidance that leads people to imply that is ever going to reach any consensus, because there's so many people who just want both groups to be exactly the same in every way and no differences at all. And what you can do, I can do. And it just feels like, and you know, with that perspective, we'll never get anywhere. We'll just end up with two working groups that are identical and no guidance between them, no technical differences, no strategy, no direction, and just just like a standstill.
Well, that sort of goes to my point about philosophy. Or if Jakarta EE is the place where things are steady and stable and very long term, and microprofile is bleeding edge, you know, things might flame out in a couple of years, but you know, that's the way it is. You know, these are sort of basic philosophical positions that can help guide people. Although I think
I agree with them. I just don't know that we'll get agreement between the working groups, right?
Right. I think there's also the other practical consideration which can't be overcome, is that if somebody's a member of one working group, they're not going to pay to join the other working group. So they'll want to do the work in the working group they're already a member of.
Well, we do pay for two, some of us here.
Well, some of us do, right? So we have a choice, and then there are people that aren't a member of either, and then you have to tell them, well, where should you go with your idea?
Yeah, you don't need to necessarily pay to develop a spec.
Can be a guess.
Well, that's true, but I'm saying if you want to be an influencer, you ultimately end up needing to join the working group in some level if you want to be a committer.
Yeah, allowed to vote. I think it's not only where to create a new spec, it's also during the lifetime of the spec where it might be located at best. Like config is currently changing the working group, and yeah, I misunderstood that word guidance, when that means this alliance gives some hints or helps people to find the right place to start, or when it's mature, maybe to change the location of the specification. Yeah, that's from my perspective the right place to discuss it here, if necessary, to help. The decisions are made within the working groups. I agree on that. And one reason, for example, could be if a microprofile specification is mature and maybe a required specification for other Jakarta EE specifications, then it's a good point to make a transition.
I would agree with all of that. I mean, that was the basis of the email that I wrote, and it was very clear that all the responses, everybody had a slightly different, most people had a slightly different perspective. So it was like, you know, like 6 responses, 6 slightly different perspectives on, you know what I mean? So like, I don't see where we come to agreement on what the guiding principles would be. We can try, you know, we can try.
We will fail. Let me just say it today is what we will fail trying it. But if the majority wants to try, so be it. However, this is going to bring us back to you are 2 working groups and you do not agree. How do you believe you will create a great technology? What I like about the different ecosystems is that because we're 2 different groups, we can survive and thrive and create this diversity. We don't need to be exact. Well, and if we continue to be mellow, the community will never understand, especially newcomers. They want to innovate and create the technology, they will never understand not only the difference, but how fun it could be a part of whichever ecosystem it is under the Eclipse Foundation. You see what I mean? I have no idea why there is this way to handhold people when we can enable the people to ask questions in the forum and make sure that we all answer as individuals, not as a group, but as individuals, right? Emily will answer one question, and then I will answer a different question, and Scott will say something different. And like that, diversity in thought is what makes us better human, kinder, everything you name it. So I am uncomfortable, but clearly I will say, if you believe the guidance is shorter, okay, there.
Okay, back to the previous what David said. I think is the guidance as long as we say okay, this the guidance is not the kind of the false rules and etc. I think it will help. As long as we agree roughly, we don't put more, detailed things. It's just like maybe it's as what you have said, David. Like if your dependency is volatile, it might work or may not work in a few years' time. And in this kind of thing, you might be better off to start in micro profile. Or if you don't have any dependencies, you see it's going to be used by Jakarta. Other specifications, you better off start in the Jakarta. So without we should not attack any working group. So basically when we discuss, we just the two working group, that's a fact. We need to work around that. That's a two working group. So not just continue saying, oh, do we need a two working group? So we just collaborate on that basis. Wow, that's a huge silence.
I don't know how to move it. I mean, we can write it down.
Sorry, I was talking into mute.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I had this great thing, this great comment that was very insightful. I'll never be able to remember.
Yeah, this is the best song in the world tribute.
Yes, exactly. So basically, I think it's almost like we have three different approaches to this, right? One is that we got to have something. One is it's too hard to get to something. And by the way, I'm over rotating maybe on describing these, right?
Sure.
And then the third one is, well, can we just put up something that's pretty abstract, right? Not get detailed. And I don't know if we can get to one here today. So here's an ask for Emily. You had an idea for an abstract, right? Wanting to kind of abstract it out, right? Not providing too much detail. Maybe if you can come up with a sample wording, right, before the next call. Scott, I think you had some ideas about what it might entail. Probably with a little bit more specificity.
Yeah, it's a tricky word.
I mean, yeah, but
specificity, yeah.
I don't think the direction I'm heading, I don't think was relevant. So I mean, I think the bigger issue is just to say something very generic, like, look, there are different fundamental differences. Look at the differences slide. If you have questions, send an email to the discussion list, and you'll get feedback. But
yeah.
It's not going to be one voice. It's going to be different opinions.
Right.
I love that. Here, that's perfect.
Yeah. And the word differences keeps coming up, but it's strategy for me.
It's super amazing.
Am I on mute?
No, you're not. I don't know how differences came up here. I always thought this was just comparison.
Yeah. Well, so again, this is one of the, like when we say things like differences, everyone wants everything to be equal. It's like, it's like, first of all, we're all under the Eclipse Foundation. We're all under the same like logical umbrella and governance structure from that perspective. And I view this as like, okay, I'm a major corporation, right? I have different needs. I have a stable thing that I'm trying to develop, but I also need to do some R&D. You know, I'm going to make an R&D team, and I'm going to make a different team to carry that stuff forward once the R&D is done. You know, there's the productionize it, right? There's almost every corporation has this setup. They got an R&D team that will spin up ideas and try some stuff, throw ideas at the wall, some stick, some don't, and the stuff that sticks, they graduated out of that R&D team, and then another team productionizes it and makes it, you know, better, whatever, so on and so forth. And that doesn't mean that the other team is completely not innovating or doing anything interesting. And there's no competition between these teams. They serve different functions. And so, you know, like I view all of us as one big community, and we amongst ourselves choose to use one brand when we're operating in more of an R&D type of a fashion, where we're trying to get early feedback, and we use a different brand when we're operating in a more long-term fashion. And I see it as one team that controls two brands, right? And we're just strategically using one brand when we have one set of goals, and a different brand when we have other set of goals. But it's very clear that other people view them as like competing efforts, and one shouldn't be better than the other, and they need to be the same in every regard. And then in which case, I don't understand what the strategy is, because there's no strategy in that, you know. That's just making them all equal. So they're for the point of just.
Yeah.
So what if we just leave it?
Go ahead, Rudy. I'm really curious what.
Okay,
Rudy
go ahead, Rudy.
Yeah, because okay, you probably don't mean it in that strong wording, but again, you're referring to this Jakarta is not innovating and just doing.
I never said that. That's
stuff.
the thing.
I know.
Like, I even try to say I don't mean it's that you can't innovate. I don't see that innovation ever stops on a specification. It's just
I know, but it still leaks through the message a bit. But the other thing what I wanted to mention before was, if we are going to put a guidance out, a very high level abstract one without really detailing information or whatever, because either we cannot or we choose not to do, is it then helpful for those people? Are they able to choose then between the two, or is it then again some loosely information which doesn't lead to anything and then is of no use for anyone?
Well,
So
an obvious fact is, where do I start my project? So, I mean, you got to deal with that.
Yeah. So let me just answer Rudy's question. I think that some guidance is valuable, at least so the industry can see that we have a strategy, right?
So what do you think about what I tried to do here? Again, this is a principle, so it's going to be fairly high level, right? I mean, without trying to get into 20 sub bullets, but in a way we do, where I just add this link that points off to this slide that compares the two, right? And that is basically guidance in some sense, right? You want, compatible patent license or an implementation patent license, right? What kind of governance do you want your project to be under, right? Here, and then, there's the technical guidance up here. So in some ways, this tries to, talk about guidance, but by deferring to the messaging slide.
I think the other thing is a kind of high level thing, is an obvious thing. Also spell out a couple bullet points also help. Like if you have a dependency on some other libraries such as CNCF, and then you are better off with macro profile, because Jakarta doesn't really want to introduce dependencies. And also if you if you create a spec and need to be used by other Jakarta specs, you're better off to put in the Jakarta. So in this way, it's like all makes sense, and also it doesn't kind of put any working group into an awkward situation either.
So that's a principle that's going to require a lot more detail if we go down to that. I mean, it would basically be a slide outlining what those things are.
New slide, right?
A new slide, yeah.
Right. So I can go ahead if people think that's the right thing to, or is a kind of good thing to do. I can go ahead and create a slide to start with draft, and then people can discuss about it.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that for the next call.
Yeah.
It would be nice if the slide was created before, like a few days before the call, so that we have some time to review, and even if we might, like I have said before, much more efficient in these calls to work together on unblocking, like we're talking technical principles. So then can we delete number 2 to do guidance on the project should start? Can we delete that part? And is there I really like what Scott said. Specification creators can choose, and we link the presentation, and then they are welcome to contact, to send questions to the forum. If we add that here, that would be perfect, because we're educating. We just add the, subscribe and contact the forum for Q&A.
So Scott, is the link to the differences slide sufficient?
Well,
what you're wanting to get at?
I would just make it a little more obvious, because I'm looking at that and going, what the hell is that link?
This is why I ask you, Scott, can you write it up? Please.
Yeah, I can write.
Seriously. Okay.
I mean, I would just take out that link and then a comma, for a comparison between how the working groups operate, see blah. Just to make it explicit what that link is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to type in some characters here and we'll see what it ends up at. Sorry, I'm just looking for the title of this prezo here real quick. Oh, we don't have a title of the prezo. Messaging. Okay.
You should not add CN4J here. Not once in the presentation, we have it. You can say the Jakarta a microprofile messenger presentation. So we will not give power to a body. This is about 2 working groups working together and finding something to mediate.
And we repeat some.
I was going to see, Scott, does this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So Jan?
Yeah, we have Jakarta or microprofile 2 times in the same sentence.
And we say working or either working group.
Yeah.
You can say
Or you
working.
can just say group, whatever.
WG.
And to reflect that the location could change during the life cycle, maybe we should add that. It's not only when it's created, when it's maintained. So we could say specification authors can choose either working group to host the specifications.
Do you mean
So that
fluid? Do you mean fluid? A Jakarta specification can migrate to microprofile, and a microprofile specification can migrate to Jakarta. Is that what you mean, Jan?
Yes.
let's write that out. John also
Say
pointed
that
out,
again, though. I thought I heard.
I would write specification authors can choose choose either working group towards the specification. Then we could add during its life cycle if we want to, and then follow with a sentence with difference outlined in Jakarta and microprofile alignment presentation.
I think there is a different, a new point, new principle. This one is one, and then the
Yeah,
next,
that's what I was thinking as well.
it's a new point. It's point number 3.
Well, here's a
Totally new.
question. Are
Mhm.
there cases where it makes sense for specification to move from Jakarta to microprofile?
Well, that was the sentence that I heard that I wanted to dig in on.
It will depend on the working groups deciding if there is something they can help with, right? We go again into, we cannot answer that question, but it should be possible to be fluid at 360, at 180.
I don't see a use case for it.
When I remember, config was first discussed in Java SE, and then it was discussed to do it within Jakarta, and then it ends up in microprofile. And now it comes back to Jakarta. So it's not the usual way, but maybe it turns out some new Jakarta sandbox project was not mature enough to end up in the platform. Then it would be a choice of the specification authors to move that to microprofile, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, like for example, NoSQL or something.
Yeah.
Been there for a very long time. Doesn't appear to be near graduation. Would it be better to put it in microprofile so we could try to get some adoption? They could even rewrite it, and that would be okay. And maybe that. Anyway, that's it's an interesting idea. I mean, if something sits there for a long time, doesn't seem to be able to get anywhere. Maybe
could
Here's
we
an
have a-
open-ended question. I mean, it's,
Yeah, sorry.
go ahead, Jan.
We could have a third point, specifications could change their working group during their life cycle as a principle.
Mhm. If it's so vague, then it leaves the generics of what would happen up to the working groups. It seems fair to me.
And that has two implications. We don't double them. We want to have a transition at the end.
Yeah, well, that was a statement that I made. Is no duplication. I think is an important one. I hope we can agree on that.
Prevent duplication. Yeah.
Because I really don't want the situation where people are writing articles about, well, should I choose the Jakarta version of blah or the microprofile version of blah? Which one's better? Let's compare and contrast. And I've done speed differences, and this one's faster, this one's slower. And people talking actually about implementation, not the specification, and just anything that would cause people to write articles comparing them as in a competitive fashion. Once they've framed it up that way, we can't undo that. So personally, I would prefer that they don't that they don't compete. That there's no duplication. The people that users are not they don't have to choose, between which one or the other.
It's bad for implementer.
Well,
With
it's bad for
time.
all of us, right? It's just we're competing with ourselves instead of with the industry at that time.
And also confusing the end users.
We use the word fork. Avoid forks. Or is that
What are
instead
other?
of duplication? I don't know.
Avoid the duplication, I would say.
Yeah. While
What-
preventing duplication as a second part of the third principle.
Got you went off mute. You were going to say something?
So what if we, at the end of its life cycle, we put a parenthesis, preventing duplication?
Well, that's its own principle. It's a
Y-
standalone principle. It's unrelated to the other ones. It's just it's a
Number
general
4.
principle.
Okay,
That's good too.
let's do that then. Principle number 4.
Yay, nay?
I obviously like it, but I would like to hear what other people think.
Sounds good to me.
Rudy, Dimitri, other people.
Oops,
Yeah,
Trying
Susan.
to,
Sorry.
I'm trying to think about that. Still coming to the point that there are 2 working groups and you need to choose one of them, right? Based on some criteria, right? And you can move from one to another, but that this is kind of a complicated step, right? So
yeah.
for putting it here without actually explanation that it can be complicated is a mistake, I think. Avoiding duplication across the 2 working groups. That's kind of another thing we are kind of trying to separate these 2, right? And yes, it's nice to avoid duplication, but it may happen, right? And what we
Yeah.
will do if it happens.
Maybe
We can do nothing in this case, right? So, I'm sorry, folks, but I have a feeling that all of this is kind of a little bit useless, right? So, I don't see the point in what they're trying to do, right? So, people have a choice, right? It's Jakarta or microprofile. You can create a spec there. You can create a spec there. This is up to you. We're not forcing you to do anything, right? Do it. But avoid specification duplication across the 2 working group. It means that if I want to create, let's say, messaging in microprofile, it's already there, by the way, right? Or if I want to create, let's say, metrics in Jakarta, right? Someone will come to me and say, hey, what are you doing? We already have a spec for metrics. You should join that working group and actually work there, right? But if I don't want to do it, in this case, I guess it should work with that I should be warned here. Here is a spec in microprofile which does metrics, but I want to create it in Jakarta. Then it comes to the review point. Then there should be questions asked. Why do you want to create it in Jakarta? What's the point of not joining a forward microprofile and so on and so on and so on? And it will be up to the Jakarta spec committee to accept or not accept the spec, right? Something like that.
Do you think that dialogue is bad though?
No, I think it's okay. I just don't quite understand what's the end goal. What's the end goal of that?
Well, the issue is that if I'm coming to the point where I decide I'm going to create a specification under one of these 2 working groups, if I've looked at the FAQ, the CN4J FAQ messaging alignment document, it shouldn't come to it shouldn't be a surprise to me that I'm being questioned on what is the reason I'm creating this here when there is a similar one that exists there. So at a minimum, I better have my reasoning for that, or else I can expect that people are not going to be accepting of that. I mean, that's what the point of this principle should be.
I guess that the main reasoning is if I want my specification to evolve and be kind of a part of, in future, of Jakarta platform, then create it in Jakarta. If I want my spec to be a part of microprofile platform in future, because let's say it correlates with existing microprofile specs, then I create it in microprofile. That's it.
Okay, but it's not just it, because from point one, you have people who implement both. From point two, there's evolution. From 2 and 3.
But what
So
is
again-
evolution? How I evolve the spec and create it in both. I can evolve it in both Jakarta and microprofile.
All right, the point is that this statement, in my mind, does have an important message. This isn't a free-for-all. This isn't a competition. I mean, if that's where we want to go, then we can quit worrying about CN4J. So, I mean, we're trying to get to what do we have basic alignment on? So I certainly don't want to see messaging and basically specs that have the same functionality in both. I mean, that's why we're discussing config, how that needs to evolve. So to me, this is a pretty fundamental principle. I mean, if there's not general agreement on that, then
I think microprofile config is a good example. Now moving to Jakarta, becoming part of the future core profile, and so came back to microprofile again. But at the end, microprofile config will be deprecated, and the lifecycle ends within microprofile at some point when it's allocated at Jakarta EE.
Right, and
that
that's
been
happening
decided?
because we have that principle, or that would likely happen because of this principle.
And we have a transition phase where might be platform implementations support both at the same time, but in the future, the microprofile part of config will be end of, in the support.
Hey, John, I put a kind of a more positive opening in there. I wrote in the notes, specification should be complementary. Duplication should be avoided.
In the
Yeah, I put it in the
notes.
chat. Sorry, I don't have
the
I
chat,
don't have the
okay.
ability to edit the
Gotcha.
slide deck. So
Oh, I
John,
thought everyone.
when we started, basically everything that we did in microprofile, you can put it on the duplication one. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. For now, I'm gonna do this so we can see both.
Yeah, because when we started, like everything that we created was complementary and built on, was complementary to the Jakarta, to the then Java EE counterparts, right? And at least on the microprofile side of the fence, I still think that's an important tenet that, we build things that extend or add on, but we deliberately don't try to, compete. Like I said, last call, if someone proposed creating a better dependency injection framework than CDI and microprofile, it would get a big -1 for me, regardless of how revolutionary it was. I'd be like, that's just pointless duplication.
also, yeah, so like take that example. Again, let's just say there is some crazy new thing. I mean, so it'd certainly get questioned, but I could see that it could actually be a new thing in microprofiles as long as it's not conflicting with the existing CDI, with the view that it would, at some point, if proven successful, get merged into a new version of the Jakarta CBI, for example.
Assuming that was even possible, usually it's
Yeah,
not.
given
Usually
a
it's
lot of
not,
what
right?
it's, but yeah, it's still embodying that principle, but realizing that there may be circumstances where you need to look at different behaviors of an existing spec.
Do you mean to like replace the fourth with the fifth blade point?
Yes.
Maybe on the fifth, it's just toward the end across the two working groups, and then delete the fourth.
Yeah.
But I think without mentioning the working groups here, in that principle, it's much better because we don't want to have that within one working group with two specifications too. We want to avoid duplication within one working group too.
Sure, I agree with that perspective.
So it's much better than the fourth point, from my opinion.
That's fine. However, within one working group, probably don't ever do the duplication. Anyway.
But yeah, it's still a valid point.
Okay, so I'm going to delete this one. Everyone agrees with that.
John, the minutes are located well under microprofile, all minutes, but the presentation is not in the community drive. I have sent you via chat the document where it needs to be located. It's under the CN4J so that everyone that wants to can edit. Hopefully no one edits it, so we do it together or via the forum. But currently, it's not.
Oh, I thought this was
Yeah, it's not.
editable by everybody.
No.
Oh, the notes were. Maybe this deck wasn't.
The notes are because I created them, but this one, for some reason, is not under the drive. So if you can move it to the drive, CN4J drive.
I have so many permissions problems. I'll try. I think this one might have been created by Emily. I'm not sure I can. One of the documents was created by Emily.
Yeah, can
She
you
might
just
have
move
to.
it? Please move it to this link, and like that we will be all in one house.
So everyone should have at this point edit access. Not that we want to willy-nilly be editing this, but
Yes.
Everyone does have access.
Emily, can you
So
I don't think I created this one though.
yeah, I'm trying to remember, to be honest.
He said
Document
John is
details.
the owner.
No, owner's me. All right. So this one, yeah, I'll move over.
Yeah, move over and we'll talk about operations.
God, I wish I could drag and drop it. I have no idea. All right, my Google Drive skills are limited. Everything just in one folder in my drive. All right. Is there anything else that needs to be added to this list?
In the third point, working group should be spelled in uppercase, right?
Yes. Thank
And
you.
there's a point on the fourth point at the end.
Something we haven't discussed, and I think it's too short now. When imagine Config moves to Jakarta, do we move just the committers that are active on the project, or do we move the entire, not move, that means duplicate? Because when we transfer one spec to the other working group, we need to know that the microprofile committers will continue to be committers in the microprofile project, but now they have gained a new house.
Well, that I don't see an issue there. I mean,
how do we guarantee this is possible?
You can't guarantee it, but in practice it works out fine.
Well, the issue though is that if any committers in my current microprofile are not members of the Jakarta working group, they will need to become members to be
Correct.
paying their committership. So there might be work for certain individuals.
Mm-hmm. So technically speaking, this is a point on this page. If you're a committer from one project, you will not lose access to commit to the microprofile side.
Well, so that's
they would have to be voted as a committer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the members of the other working group.
Right.
Right.
So just here's a technical point that makes what you say really complicated. Is that in microprofile, everybody has access to all repos. So if a technology were to move from microprofile to Jakarta, you can't write a rule that says everybody who had access to it before has access to it in the future, because that means like the entire microprofile committer list would be a committer on that new repo, even if you've never even contributed to that.
Right, because in Jakarta, typically each specification is an individual Eclipse project, and
Right.
thus maintains its own committer set.
Right.
You know what the good news is? We have an entire 2 weeks to chew on this point. We're at the bottom of the
Well,
hour.
I am bringing it on. I am bringing it right on before we go on, because this is something important. In
Yeah.
microprofile, we
It
have
is a very good point.
It is a
50
point, but
meters.
I haven't
50
seen it be an
meters.
issue,
But
but it is a point.
But you
It's a-
see, personally, sorry about this, but personally, I would be offended if if those are documented and maintained and are non-code, like will be a few of us in like have been from the start supporting the project, that we are left behind. Do you understand that is the marketing side, that is all these other things that are so important and that are equally important? So we need to be super careful. I will be into config moves, the 50 committers move, but they do not really move. They just gain a new house. And if we have a problem with this and we have to pick and choose, then many people, and I will say many people will feel, hey, because I am not appreciated because I don't write code. What is microprofile? Microprofile is the only project under the Eclipse Foundation that appreciates and actually nominates non-coders. And if we are going to lose that, then we have a serious problem, because
All
we
right.
are saying,
All right.
no, just let's go. It's 1 minute, but let's talk
We're
about.
at, yeah, we're 1 minute over.
All right. So it's something bringing up on the list, on the CN4J list, as them to discuss. All right. So in 2 weeks, I'll set up another call.
I
2
will add it to
weeks.
the agenda.
And yeah, I mean, got to think about what the next steps are, right? And maybe that's a discussion also on the list. I mean, we don't need 100 principles, right? So let's just see if there's anything critical missing, and then we can have that conversation next week. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. See you same bat time, same bat channel in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
everybody.
Bye.
This is the
Bye-bye.
start. Bye everyone.
Bye.